Artlist.io.
Hello, and welcome to Rainbow Dreamcatcher,
The Love Podcast.
My name is Nilla, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and relationship coach. I travel the world helping individuals to learn the skills they need to have happy and healthy relationships.
And I'm Big Sexy, her loving husband and co-host, here to provide brevity.
So today, guys, we have a really interesting topic. I am really excited to get into this today.
Me too.
Just as an FYI, because we are going to have kind of a different type of podcast today, we're not going to get into a question of the day today. And we're also not going to have a listener story. We're going to have some really wonderful guests. And so I want to make sure we have enough time to be able to get into some different areas of the topic that we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, because this also isn't the kind of topic where you just want to dip your toe in.
No.
You know, and just
it depends.
Right. I was going to say you don't want to
in.
just scratch the surface, but scratching the surface might also be a part of it as well.
So dipping toes, scratching stuff.
So what are we talking about today?
Today, we're going to talk about all things kink and BDSM in particular. Really super excited. Wanted to first chat a little bit about just the history of BDSM, not getting into it too much because I don't know an awful lot of it, to be perfectly honest. And maybe throw out some stats and then introduce our guests and let's get started on this conversation.
Let's do it.
So BDSM, there are so many different definitions. We're going to go with kind of an umbrella definition right now, but we're getting to the definition when we talk to our guests.
We'll dig into the
but it can be bondage, domination, sadomasochism, or submission. There are a lot of different ways that people describe or would utilize those acronyms, right? So I'm not going to get too much into that. We'll talk about that as we talk to our guests. But it's had a really interesting history. We kind of think of it as, or at least I think some folks think of it as like this kind of new avant-garde way of engaging in sexuality. But I gotta tell you, it has been around for a very, very long time.
Right.
When we look at things like cuneiform tablets, there are deities that have lots of indicators that, they're talking about scratching and biting and submission. There's a few deities that are actually part of their actual worship involves submission.
Okay. I'm sure there was a lot of that in the caveman era too.
That would be cuneiform. Yep.
The scratching and biting and
scratching and the biting and the grunting. I think the grunting goes along with that.
Right.
It's had kind of an unfortunate history, at least in our country, in America. In that starting in 1905, it was actually classified as a mental illness. And because of that, a lot of folks have experienced a lot of harm about that. Things like losing visitation, losing other rights, lots of oppression. And we'll talk about that as well. But it's a lot more common than I think people realize. I think it's becoming more understood.
It's damn near mainstream now. Well, at least, I mean, not the truth of it, but I think again, that surface scratching is mainstream.
I think people flirt with the idea of, but I think they really flirt with more the stereotype of, right? And we really want to just dig in today, talk about some of these things, and really understand what this community and what this practice really looks like, right? So just some stats, right? Like I said, it's much more common than people realize. From what I can read, and a lot of this is sourced from a study done by Benjamin Bedbible. Shout out, thank you for doing the study, where he sent self-reported surveys to over 12,000 individuals. This came back, and according to this study, 86% of Americans have either tried BDSM or are interested in trying BDSM in some way, shape, or form. That breaks down to 42% who have tried and 46% who are interested. Of the 42% who have tried it at least once, 60% repeat it at least once a month.
Oh, wow.
So something must be happening.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
People are very into this. Well, you know what? I feel like I'm getting way too in the weeds.
I think. Well,
here's what I want to do.
Well, one thing I want to mention is that we talked about in the previous episode.
Yes.
That this really, one, kind of sparked the idea of this conversation, and two, why I feel comfortable chatting about it is because we met.
Right. We did.
We met
at
a dungeon.
In a dungeon. Yeah. At a place called the Power Exchange
in Las Vegas.
So it'll be
I was there, and I can and now we can get into a little weeds about the details. Because we just said dungeon on the last episode.
Woo, we sure did.
I was there as by request of a friend who was the host Dom for the night.
That's right.
Shout out to Rowan, and she was. It had been my first time at a dungeon in Vegas.
Yeah,
I put that caveat on it because I've been to a couple dungeons in LA before, back when I had no idea what the fuck was going on. But this time I knew what the fuck was going on, and I went to check it out and walked around. And you were there.
I was there. I was with my former partner, and I was just hanging out. Like, I wasn't playing that particular night. I was just hanging out with some friends, chilling. I don't think I even talked to you because I assumed that you were the actually the slave of the dominant that you were there with.
Right.
And we'll talk about these terms later, y'all. So I didn't even really engage you a whole lot
at all,
really. Honestly. So interesting that we.
And I was also like just checking the place out. Like I wasn't looking to meet folks.
Yeah.
And intriguing. And then you're always waiting for like a introduction of sorts, whatever. And that didn't really ever come. And so that was a very eye-opening and interesting experience. And then I kind of became a regular there. So I definitely fall into the 40% of the 60% of the 86% or whatever it was. That would go back regularly. So much so that I even made a mixtape.
Oh, that's right.
Of BDSM themed songs because the music they were initially playing was booty. It's terrible. It's like, what owner used to love the Ren Fair? Because there was a lot of like Ren Fair-esque style of music. I'm like, this is not setting the mood.
No, it was not setting the mood.
Yeah,
so
I went through a lot of the music that I listened to, and of course, a lot of the artists, especially a lot of hip hop, had a lot of BDSM themed songs, and and then shortly after that closed down.
Yeah, for other reasons, for a variety of different reasons. So y'all, enough about us, really, enough about us, and let's actually introduce you to our guests. I am super excited today to have the author of Igniting the Fire: The Art of Romantic Submission, and the owner of the Crow Academy, Master Arcane, and his 24/7 submissive and life partner, Daphne. Guys, yay!
Hello.
Welcome to
the podcast, y'all.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
So glad you could join us. We're super excited to chat with you. And I think I'm going to just start with that very first question because I kind of stumbled through the definition of BDSM, what it actually is. It has a lot of different kinds of meanings for folks or different expressions for folks. Help our listeners, if you wouldn't mind, to understand a little bit from your perspectives how you define BDSM.
Okay. The one thing I want to tell everybody listening is that if you're truly unfamiliar with BDSM, or if you have to explain what BDSM is to somebody who's completely clueless about it, this is the best analogy I have ever heard, doing this for over 30 years, to describe what BDSM is all about. Now, when I say BDSM, we're talking about the physical sensations and why it's attractive. Imagine you have just come home from a hard day of work, and all you want to do is take a good hot bath. You go into the bathroom, you turn on the hot water, you turn on the cold water, and you adjust them till you get a temperature that you think is going to be really, really good right there, right then, that night, as it is. You fill up the bathtub, and then you take that first step into the water, and it's a little bit shocking. But what do? You keep getting in the water because it's a good shocking and you like it. You want more of it. You submerge yourself completely into the water, and you have found your zone, your zen, your place, your spot. That is exactly where the very best BDSM is meant to take a person. every time.
Okay.
And
Nice.
the thing
That is a
is,
good analogy.
on a different day, a different night, you might want it a little colder. You might want it a
Mhm.
little hotter. And that's perfectly normal. Same thing with
Mhm.
BDSM. Sometimes you want a harder scene. Sometimes you want a softer scene.
Mhm.
So that is the best description of BDSM. I have seen people who were almost terrified about the concept of BDSM, and you tell them that, what I did, they called the bathtub analogy, and all of a sudden you watch their eyes just light up and go, "Oh, I get it. I get it." I'm talking.
Right.
I've used this to explain it to my parents, right? So
Okay.
believe me,
Right.
and they're kind of on the conservative side. So the
Right.
word BDSM, as you mentioned earlier, comes from an older term, sadomasochism. I think the actual BDSM, those four initials, that sort of an acronym, that's very recent. That's only showed up in like the last 40, 50 years.
Mhm.
But you did a good job explaining it. It's bondage and discipline. That's the BD. DS in the middle is domination, submission, and S&M at the end is sadism and masochism. The bondage and discipline part is a little bit of a cliche thing from the 70s or 60s, because what is bondage and discipline? It's like that's kind of saying like, a bowl of cereal and a stereo. It's like they're not really, two things that don't really go together.
Right.
Yeah.
Discipline is discipline, but the idea is that somebody is being a commanding, kind of personality telling someone what to do, or a dominatrix with her client punishing him. We use the word punishment as opposed to punishment because the person's enjoying it. They're not really being
Right.
punished.
Right.
They're
Yeah.
paying to get this kind of activity.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I will self-proclaim as probably the person who knows the least about this subject of the four of us, because I had no idea that, and I'm learning shit today. That's a beautiful thing, that the words were broken up in that fashion. I'm
Oh
very
yeah.
much the key that the BDSM just
It's like four
meant
things.
was four things.
Mhm.
Was bondage, discipline, sadoism, and masochism.
Yep.
If I'm saying those
Yeah.
words right? And that was
And
it.
Yeah.
I hadn't done the BND stands for this, DNS
D,
stands for this,
exactly. Yeah.
S&M stands for this.
Yeah.
Like that's
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
interesting.
And if you want
The
more
other.
detail,
Yeah.
sadomasochism, the sado part comes from Marquis de Sade, who wrote a lot
Yes.
of crazy books about heavy duty sadomasochistic practices. What a lot of people don't know is that he actually wrote those when he was in prison as a way to politically attack some of the people who
Right.
put him in prison. There's a really
Right.
great movie called Quills that goes into this
Yes.
whole story.
Very great.
Mhm.
Very good movie.
Yeah.
And masochism, Masoch, was from a
Mm.
guy named Victor von Masoch, who wrote a book called Venus and Furs about a man who
Oh.
was infatuated with this beautiful woman and
Yeah.
wanted her to punish him and act very aggressively towards him. And so that's where we get the word masochism from.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I've also heard that the discipline part also refers to the other meaning of discipline, right? Meaning that there are a lot of practices that require practice, right?
Oh,
So,
Oh, yeah,
like
that's
rope play or other forms of play that really require a certain amount of expertise that you can't just really jump into.
yeah.
And so that it also refers to the discipline of actually learning how to do these various different practices. In addition to the idea that there's like a structured discipline or a hierarchy kind of discipline.
let me
Interesting.
comment on
Yeah.
that really directly. One of the main things that we push and teach at the Crow Academy is that BDSM is absolutely, capital A, an art form.
Mhm.
It is an art form,
Yep.
just like piano playing, just like painting, just like sculpting.
Yeah.
The more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. The longer you do it, the more kind of skills, the more your repertoire is going to build, all of that. So absolutely, there's a very much of a self-discipline aspect to
I
it.
was going to say, yeah, self-discipline's a big part of
Mhm.
BDSM for both the dominant and the sub.
Mhm. Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
mhm.
So I'm really curious, you guys, because Arcane, you mentioned that you've been doing this for 30 years. Daphne, I'm not sure how long you've been engaged in this. I'm just kind of curious for each of you. How did you discover this? When did you get into it? Why did you go into it? Help us understand a little bit of context and how this came to be a part of your lives.
You want to go first?
I was going to say one at Rochambeau.
Only if you do it the
Yeah.
BDSM
All right. One, two. Oh, okay. All right. Okay, you go first. I was just going to say.
The truth of the matter is that I got into the concept of bondage when I was a very small child.
Mhm.
I was the only little boy on a street full of little girls, and 75% of our childhood games involved the narrative, the popular damsel in distress narrative
Mhm.
of the girl gets kidnapped and tied to the railroad tracks and all this stuff. Because I was the only little
Right.
boy, I had to play both roles. I had to play the villain and I had to play the hero. So literally be in my friend's
Wow.
garage and I'd be the villain and I'd kidnap her and tie her up with whatever we had around, very, very childish bondage, of course.
Right.
And then I'd kind of role play that. And then I would sort of go outside the garage and pretend to change into Captain America or whoever and come back and rescue her and save the day. So it was the narrative. I did that a lot. And I found that I really enjoyed the part where I tied the girl up and I would sort of stretch that part out as long as I could until the person I was playing with was like, I don't want to be this. Let's change. Let's do something else. Okay. I go be the hero and save
This
the day.
is my favorite part.
Exactly. So it's been with me my entire life, technically speaking. And then I just got, blessed by the fetish gods or whatever, that my very, very first real girlfriend, real partner, she actually came out to me first that she wanted to be tied up and treated roughly and all this kind of stuff. And I just felt like I hit the jackpot. And so that was my start. That was a lot more than 30 years ago. 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, I moved to Europe and I discovered that there was a community for all of this. And that was my life for 2 years in Europe. I just did every single thing. I went to the clubs. I helped run the clubs. I worked at the clubs. My partners were like these fantastic, like stellar, dominant, submissive couples. The kind, like we'd been a BDSM full of great people who knew exactly what they were doing.
Right.
And this one couple would just get up on stage to start doing a scene and everybody in the club would stop. The music would keep going, but you'd see people untying their partner really fast because, like, you got to watch these guys. The guy would do an entire scene with a set of leather restraints and a riding crop. And it didn't matter what toys he was using. It was mesmerizing. These people were deeply, deeply in love. And I had another couple of friends who were they were the crazy ones. They would do wild scenes. They would do stuff that I probably can't even talk about here on the show. But the point is, they were also madly in love. They were madly in love with each other. They were both switches, actually. So I get both. They'd sort like one time one be the top, then another be the top, and they'd go back and forth. By the way, the word top means someone who enjoys using the toys physically. The word dominant means someone who enjoys the psychological power of control and command over the other person. The opposite of a top is a bottom, someone who likes having the toys used on them. And the opposite of a dominant is a submissive, someone who enjoys being in the position of being commanded and told what to do and instructed and guided.
Yeah. Can you also explain, because you said a couple of times that they started a scene. For folks who are not familiar, can you help folks to understand what you mean when you say a scene?
Because, I'm an actor and I hear the word scene, I think,
And scene, yeah.
A scene.
Right.
Okay, yeah. So think of the word scene as like a session, okay? The dominant, the submissive, or the top and the bottom. And by the way, a lot of people are both dominant and top, and the other person is both a bottom and a submissive. Very common. It's just good to know they're separate entities, but they are usually overlap.
Right.
A scene is when these two people get together and decide to have a dedicated time spent with each other doing BDSM activity, whether it's really leaning into the toy use or whether it's really leaning into like being sexual and bondage and whatnot, or maybe there's no play at all and it's strictly a verbal command and situation where the dominant talks the submissive through a whole bunch of stuff, or there's such a thing as a training session where you teach the submissive how to stand a certain way or how to hold their eyes a certain way. All of those would be a BDSM session, and the colloquial term for a BDSM session is the word scene, S-C-E-N-E, with a lowercase s. That's an important distinction. If you have the word scene with an uppercase s, it refers to the BDSM community at large, the scene.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. So I was going to ask, are you having a scene? Because when I hear scene, I think there has to be an audience.
Oh,
right?
no. In
But
fact,
for BDSM,
I'm glad you brought that up.
there doesn't have to be an audience.
Correct.
Not at all. In fact, BDSM clubs are wonderful. I think anybody who wants to explore the BDSM community and get educated about it is going to have to go and be part of the community. But I have found to this day that the very, very, very best scenes you're going to have with your loving partner are going to be the scenes you have in private, really.
Definitely.
Daphne and I have probably
Yeah.
done 1,000 scenes at this point,
Mhm.
and both
Easily.
in public
Yeah.
and in private. And the private scenes are always amazing, mind blowing.
Mhm.
The public
Right.
scenes are always fun. We have a really good time, but they don't quite have that deep, undisturbed intimacy that you can achieve
Yeah.
in private.
Right.
Yeah.
Also,
And then
sex in
Daphne,
public is.
yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to ask, how did you come into the scene, capital S? Like, how did you come into
Oh,
the community? How did you learn about this for yourself? How did you
yeah.
get into this?
So I think I got really lucky, and I grew up in a very open-minded family. So sex was very much talked about, and it was celebrated in my household. And I was also allowed to watch rated R movies, and I remember watching. I think it was like Basic Instinct. I think.
Oh,
Or did
yeah.
that movie come out in the 90s? I don't know. I was a kid. All I remember is just watching that movie. And that movie is pretty vanilla, right? However, like there's a couple of scenes in there that are kind of kinky, right? And so stuff like that, that's kind of what started like getting my mind going as a young girl, being able to like watch those. And funny enough, I actually just had a conversation with my girlfriend where it kind of occurred to me that as a little girl, like watching cartoons and movies and whatnot, I always like had a soft spot for the villain, right? And I'm like, oh my God, like I have a villain kink, right? And so I think that actually played into like wanting, to find somebody to emulate those characters, so to speak. Because I would sit there and fantasize about like, oh, what if the heroine was kidnapped by the villain? Like that would be so hot, right? And so when I became a young adult and with my first boyfriend, we experimented a bit, and I had already had this inclination to be submissive in the bedroom. So I wanted somebody who was kind of fierce. And it unfortunately it didn't work out. I actually had a much tougher time than Arcane did trying to find somebody to do this with. And I remember being, I think, like 22 years old. I was in Sacramento. This was about 8 years ago, almost 9 years ago, and trying to find the BDSM scene. Also, because I'm totally forgetting this. I read this comic called Sunstone, and I can't pronounce the. I'm sorry, Stephen, if that's how you say your name. I know it's not, but you guys should look it up. It's called Sunstone. It's a great graphic novel, and it's not like super true to like BDSM, like tenets and whatnot. Like he gets some stuff wrong, but for the most part, it's really cute and it's really fun. It's a very light-hearted story about two women finding each other and falling in love and becoming dominant and submissive. And I remember I had just gotten out of a bad breakup, and I was like, you know what? Like he never wanted to do that stuff. I'm gonna find somebody who does, because I've been wanting this. And a very, very good friend of mine who I went and moved in with was like, you should go for it. Like get into it. You've always wanted this. And so I said, all right, I'm gonna do it. And so I went online and was researching the heck out of it, and then I stumbled upon, Master Arcane's The Crow Academy, his website, and I decided to, hey, I've got a couple of questions. I'm gonna ask this guy, and sure enough,
Wow.
one
Yeah.
thing led to another. Yeah,
And here you are.
and here we are. Yeah,
Yeah.
almost nine
Yeah,
years
almost
Ba-
9
later.
years later.
Basic Instinct
Yeah.
came out in 1992.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. So
Yeah.
I think I remember I was young. I must have been like 6, but it's one of my mom's favorite movies. Like
Right.
that and like Original Sin, those really, really steamy movies that, for the
Yes.
most part are vanilla, right? But I would say Basic Instinct was pretty up
It's
there.
funny to think, that those movies are vanilla once you have an understanding of what not vanilla is.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah. Right. Oh,
let's also talk about that term, right? Because we've been
yes.
tossing it out
Okay.
a little bit.
Yeah.
What do you mean when we say vanilla?
So vanilla is not a derogatory term, whatever. I mean, it literally
No.
just means not kinky, right? Vanilla ice cream is still really good. So is
Right.
chocolate ice
As I
cream.
say, it's one
So
of the best flavors of ice creams.
yeah, exactly. So it just means like sex that is not kinky. And I should also say that some of the best forms of sexuality, tantra, is vanilla. So not
Mhm.
Right.
derogatory whatsoever.
Right.
We
Okay.
absolutely love vanilla sex. I believe it's a staple in most BDSM relationships. You cannot have kinky sex all the time. You can have a lot of it,
Right.
but you got to mix it up.
But
And I
So,
also,
understand
as
your hesitation with the dude's name. It's like Step Heppen, Sejik,
it's Sejvin. I'm sorry.
Sejpen, Sejik.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, Stepan, if we're butchering your name.
Yeah,
Come on the
No, yeah.
podcast and set us correctly.
we'll put it in the links. We'll definitely we'll put a lot of links on this one, guys, because there's going
Yeah.
to be a lot of information
Yeah, that you may want to
that you may
review and
want
check
to
out.
revisit. So we'll
Yeah.
make a note to put Sunstone, the graphic novel.
Mm-hmm.
However you say that name.
Yeah.
We'll put that down there.
on the subject of Tantra, there was an interesting note is that there's a wonderful new trend, because I've been studying Tantra as long as I've been having sex in my life. And there's a new trend that I'm really enjoying where Tantra and BDSM are being interlinked intimately.
Mhm.
And Daphne and I taught at a convention in Australia in 2018, 2019.
Mhm.
That was a BDSM convention for several days. And every single class was about whatever the subject was, tantrically speaking. It was amazing.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Amazing.
That's great.
Yeah, I think Sting made tantric mainstream.
kind of
Put it in the
Main
zeitgeist,
Sting.
in the mainstream.
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 I like that. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you all met through your seeking information, wanting to have some questions. I'm curious, and I'm sure our listeners would also want to know, if I'm interested in this kind of thing, how do you meet people? How do you actually engage other folks? It just seems like I don't know, a weird thing to kind
Well, you're
of
not gonna walk up in the grocery store
and be like,
pick up
"Excuse
your-
me,
So
pardon
you
me."
see the apple
Yeah,
you
right.
got there? Would you be willing to put that in my mouth?
That's probably not going to go well.
Yeah,
Or
that's
maybe it
not
will.
gonna
I
happen.
don't know.
I mean, it might, but it's less likely to have the desired effect. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Well,
how do you meet people? How do you gain information? Let's say I'm starting from absolute zero. It's something I might be interested in. How do I learn about this?
well, the first thing you want to do is there is a website. It's a great resource. It's not wall-to-wall angels. There are your full spectrum of people on there, people who
Oh,
are
yeah.
really there to help, people who are there who are for very selfish reasons. But it's
Mhm.
called FetLife, FETLIFE,
Familiar.
FetLife.com. It's free to join. There are over, probably at this point, 40,000 different groups and forums on here. So when you join it, you can literally type in the search bar what your specific kink is you want to learn about. You'll get a whole list of groups. So that's one place you can start. You can also, this is one of the best places, when you're ready to meet someone in person, at the very top of the website, there's the word places. And you can look up your country, you can look up your city and your local area, and you can look for things like meetings, parties, events, and what is called a munch. And a munch is a great way.
Funch is a munch.
What the
munch
Funch
is
is a munch?
great way to get your feet wet. Great way to start,
yeah.
because munches are super informal, usually held in a public place, even like a
PT's
diner or
Gold
something
and
like that.
on the corner.
And it's like you just kind of take over a corner of the place and people just talk and hang out. Just no pretense. Generally speaking, you're going to have at least a mildly enjoyable time at a munch. Then when you're ready, you can start looking for the parties and the events, the big events, the small events. So in person is going to be great. But one thing I really want to tell listeners, don't go to these events expecting to hook up right away. What you want to do is go to these events and make friends. You want to build your BDSM social circle, because one of the best ways to meet someone in the scene is when you get introduced by another person in the scene. So I literally had this happen. I had a very long-term partner. We're still friends, and she was introduced to me by a friend of mine in the San Francisco scene at a party, because I had a lot of friends, and he literally said, "Oh, I want you to meet this girl. She's a submissive, and she's looking for a dominant. Maybe you guys will have something to talk about." Just like that, that simple. But the point is, I didn't go there expecting to find anybody or expecting to hook up. I just simply have made a lot of friends in the community. And because one thing that's going to happen if you go into the community to find somebody, and this is what you should do yourself, is you want to vet the other person. You want to find out about this person. Do they have a good reputation? Do they have no reputation? And I want to say, just because someone's an expert doesn't mean that's a person to go for. Because sometimes You yourself might be a beginner, and you want to find another beginner who's on the other side of the coin so you can learn and grow together. And that's awesome. That's great. You go to the classes together. You try the stuff when you get home. A lot of people do that, and that's perfectly good too.
Yeah,
So that's
I
one.
think. Yeah, I think I want to highlight too. What I really think that a lot of folks don't understand is that it's not just certain sexual practices or even non-sexual practices, but that there is an actual community
Oh
of
yeah.
folks that have, a wide spectrum of experiences, a variety of different ages, a ton of different interests,
Interests, careers, everything.
career,
Yeah.
all of that, right? So it's not just plugging into a way to do a thing, but also like a way to meet people, a way to
Make friends.
engage, make friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I first got into the BDSM community in Amsterdam and London, that's all I did because
Hmm.
I didn't know anybody.
Hmm.
And, after a short period of time of going to every single party I could, I'm telling you that inside the BDSM event, I met people from every imaginable walk of life,
Hmm.
from television producers to people living in a squat,
Hmm.
people who had hardly any money, but they had a good rep in the scene, so they'd let them in the club. Every imaginable career and position
Hmm.
and models and administrators and construction workers, just everything. And the
Hmm.
funniest thing actually is that when you're in that community, like in the vanilla world, you go out, you go to party, you meet people, and you're like, oh, so tell me about yourself. And they're like, well, this is my career. They lead with that.
Right.
Right.
And maybe if you get to know them really, really, really well, you'll learn about their sexuality. In the fetish community, in the BDSM community, it's literally the opposite. You
Yeah.
walk into these
Yeah.
events
Right.
and people are wearing their sexuality on their sleeve. It's the
Right.
first thing you know about them. And then every conversation from there is just downhill.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, I'm just reminded, particularly in terms of just mental health. What's really interesting is that folks, even though this was classified as a mental illness, now we actually understand that folks that engage in BDSM often have a higher level of mental wellness because there is a certain amount of self-awareness and awareness of others that's required. And as a relationship coach and therapist, the other thing I find is that there is often a higher level of communication about difficult topics. I can tell you a lot of folks that will have a lot of challenges in relationships, sometimes even sexual challenges in relationship, and they won't know how to talk about it, right?
Yeah.
And one of the
Whereas,
things in the BDSM community is that that's square one.
mhm,
If you're going to be in the BDSM community, one of the things you have to perfect is the ability to engage jaw, move your tongue around, push air past your vocal cords, and communicate. They
yeah,
say the three pillars of BDSM are trust, honesty, and communication with a capital C.
okay,
Um, Daphne and I, like I said, 1,000 scenes. We still to this day, after almost every single scene, we ask each other, how did it go? What did you like? Was there anything that didn't work? What was your favorite part? And
right,
just always talking, constantly talking.
Oh yeah.
And,
I was gonna say,
if,
in fact, now I'm actually keeping a journal. Even though we are like almost 9 years into our relationship, we just, the other day we thought, hey, it would be a good idea. Like, what if we wrote down like some of the most, like, what happens when we have a really great scene? And let's write that down. Like, let's write, what time of night it was. What style of bondage did we do? What toys did we use? This, that, and the other. And I don't know. I think that's kind of a great thing to do. So that way in the future, we can be like, oh, I just want like a really good scene like this. How did we do that in the past? And then maybe like, hey, we
mhm,
have it in a book. Like, let's
We
check
have a
it out.
guidebook.
yeah,
We have a guidebook, right?
yeah,
And so, but yeah, I would say that communication between two people that engage in BDSM, it really does have to. It has to be taken up a notch, just because we're doing things that just absolutely require full communication. There's no room for mind reading. There's no room for, well, they should just know why I'm upset. You can't have that. You know what I mean? You got
right,
to
nope.
have that personal
right,
responsibility to say what you're feeling, what's not working for you, and it's absolutely crucial.
yeah,
I
And
would
it's
also
good.
say
It's
that a good place, if you have questions about BDSM and stuff like that, to go would be it's thecrowacademy.com.
Yes,
Mhm.
Am I saying
thecrowacademy.com.
that address correctly? Yes,
Yeah,
the
perfect. Yeah.
crowacademy.com is a great place to
CROW
go.
Academy.
Yeah.
But just don't think you're gonna hook up with the guy who runs it, because that
Oh, yeah.
position is taken.
It
Happily
is
taken.
taken. Yeah. I mean, you can try, but we'll sit and laugh.
Oh, trust me. This is where
So-
she starts to scare me. She's like, "Ugh."
So, ooh, let me ask you this question, because this
Yeah.
is something that I think is confusing for folks who might not have a clear understanding of how some of this works. Let's say I want to have, domination. I want to be submissive. I want to get into this in some way. Help me understand how consent works. How does
Mm.
consent work in this space? Because I don't know if I want you to do things or non-consensual. Like, help me understand that dynamic.
Well, to start with, there's consent is key.
Okay.
Technically speaking, nothing happens in the BDSM community without consent. Okay, from
Enthusiastic
square
consent.
one,
Mhm.
enthusiastic consent, right? But that's part of the fun. We have what's called the initial negotiation. When you're first sitting with somebody, you're about to play for the first time, and you've got your basic questions. What are you into? Is there anything you don't like? What are your limits? Critical thing to ask. And both people have to answer these questions. One of the big mistakes people make is there's a bit of a myth out there that only the submissive needs to talk about what they want and don't want, and the dominant is supposed to go
Right.
and just be like that. Wrong. Recipe for
Mhm.
disaster. The dominant also
Right.
has to know what they want and what they don't want, and equally communicate it back. And that's how you get both people on the same page.
Okay.
And then all the areas of overlap in this Venn diagram of what the dom wants and the submissive wants, that's where you play, is in the middle of the Venn diagram.
Right. Okay.
And
And
then
I've heard the term consensual non-consent. Is that
exactly,
what that means?
that's the next level. So
Okay.
consensual non-consent means that the submissive or the bottom is agreeing to consent to the general game that is about to be played out, the general sessions that are about to be played out, or in the case of a DS relationship, like what Daphne and I have, the general rules of the relationship.
Mhm.
And they've accepted that they may experience things that were not at the top of their list, or things they didn't expect, or be asked to do things that it's not their favorite thing to do. Maybe the
Dishes.
submissive would rather be watching Housewives of Beverly Hills. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I thought that's the
What'd you
first thing
say?
that came to
What did
I
you
said
say?
dishes. Doing the
Dishes.
dishes.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's
Let's-
legit. That's
The,
legit.
Yeah,
the,
it
the,
is.
the
Daphne,
reason I'm laughing so hard. Our last episode was called Housework.
Was about housework. All about
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
housework.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
Daphne has chores as part of her duties
Yeah.
as my submissive. And maybe she'd rather be playing a game or something else like that. And it's
Oh
like,
yeah.
no, she's got to do her chores.
I've got stuff
Yeah,
to do.
So
Yeah.
she'd much
that's
rather
where
be on
consensual
Baldur's Gate.
non-consent comes in on a
Yeah.
light level.
Yeah.
In the middle of a scene, it could mean something like the submissive says to the dominant, I like impact play, I like paddles, I like canes, and I like some flogging. And so the dominant pulls out these toys. Maybe he blindfolds the submissive, and maybe he uses the cane in a certain way that you can see the submissive's enjoying it, but he wants to cause a little trick in there in the middle. So all of a sudden he uses the cane a little harder, and the submissive jumps. And the submissive can signal that was too much, or the submissive can be like, okay, it wasn't what I expected, but I can roll with it.
Got
And in
it.
which case, that point, that's falling under the consensual non-consent. You still
Okay.
have things like hand signals and safe words. I hope your audience knows what
Yes.
safe words are. I can describe it
Let's talk
briefly.
about that. I don't want to make
Yeah.
any assumptions. What are
Okay,
signals
so
and safe
a
words?
safe word is a militarily efficient 1 or 2 syllable word that conveys a world of information about the person's state, where they're at, if they're having a good time, if something is off. The most common safe words is the stoplight system, red, yellow, green. So
Mhm.
red means we're done, the scene is over, I don't want to play anymore. Yellow means I'm basically having a good time, but something going on right this minute is off for me. Maybe that toy is too intense for me. Maybe the position that I'm in on the BDSM furniture, the St. Andrew's Cross or the play bench, maybe it's uncomfortable. Maybe there's a knot pressing into their back in a weird way or something like that. And they just need that one thing to clear up, and then they're back to the third color, green. Green means great, everything's good, full steam ahead. Those are safe words. There's more safe words than that. And people sometimes like to use a safe word that's completely out of left field, like pineapple is a running joke.
Pineapple is the most common stereotypical safe word.
Stereotypical, exactly.
Yeah.
So The idea being is that you're not going to say, even if you're deep in a really beautiful role play, like let's say you're both theater arts majors and you're doing a role play that's super intense. And, in the middle of this thing, you might have like resistance play where the person's like, no, don't. But if they're not using the safe word, what they're really doing is they're just acting.
Yep.
But if they were to say pineapple, it means, yeah, actually what you're doing right now is not working for me.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the other person can back off or pull it back or whatever's been negotiated. This is the importance of the initial negotiation. You got to have this thing as worked out as you can. And if you're both beginners, you'll kind of work through it. You'll learn as you go. And the important thing is just make sure you debrief after every single time you play. And then you grow together. And that's beautiful.
And then I also want to add that, dominance, you don't have to wait for the submissive. If you want to know where they're at, you can inquire. So for instance, we use the stoplight system. So if you're in the middle of like a pretty intense scene and you're wondering like, wow, is my submissive okay? Like, are they enjoying this? You can lean in and go green. And if they nod, give you a thumbs up or say, yes, green, then everything's good.
Yep, forward.
So
And
both
then
people
also mid-scene. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying both people can use
both
words.
people can. Exactly. Mid-scene, you have signals. Like at the Crow Academy, we teach what's called the 5-finger system. So the submissive, because submissives get into this really beautiful state quite often. It's called subspace. Amongst other things, BDSM causes a lot of endorphin release.
Right.
And endorphins, for people who don't really know, are your body's natural opiates. Okay, you don't need to take a pill to get endorphin release. They'll come on their own just fine. It's part of your body's reaction to, when we're all cave people and you got an injury, the endorphins flood the system so you can make your way back to camp or back to your tribe and heal and get better. In BDSM, you intentionally cause a little bit of an endorphin release that can make some people basically high, natural body high, but in a very big way. And so in the case of that, to have to speak, if you've ever tried to like write down your dreams right when you wake up, you have to shift your mind into a different place. And then so if someone's in subspace and they want to stay there, it's much easier to give a hand signal holding up a certain number of fingers to tell the dominant where you are. And they can stay in the subspace while doing this. So you have safe words, you have mid-scene, signals and whatnot. We actually have what we call a safe song, which is if, let's say, Daphne's gagged, and so she can't speak a safe word.
That was going to be my question.
Yeah, she can actually, like one of ours is Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, because there is no context and no role play where Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star is appropriate.
Yeah.
And she'll just start singing it at a really high.
I mean, at least in our role plays, or our scenes.
But you can pick whatever you want. So you can just pick something that's really, really out there. And then
that
if they start singing it really
Yeah.
loud, then you're like, okay, you've pre-negotiated. What does it mean if that song gets sung? Is it a yellow call? Is it a red call? We've negotiated that it's a yellow call, and it means I need to investigate something. So lot of communication.
Yeah. So it sounds like we've kind of moved into an arena of safety, and I'm kind of curious if there are areas or practices that you would consider to be, I guess, are there practices that are unsafe or dangerous? Or if I'm beginning to kind of move into this space, I don't know an awful lot about it. Are there things I should be aware of or wary of, or is it just kind of like, as long as we negotiate this, we're cool?
Oh, well, okay. So a couple of things that I'll list to be wary of. First of all, to answer your first question, yes, there absolutely is beginning BDSM, intermediate BDSM, and very, very advanced BDSM. I actually have classes that I will not teach unless someone can convince me they've been doing at least a year regularly of BDSM. I'm like, you're not ready for this. This is way beyond you. You got to be good at the basics first. It's like a martial art in that sense. You're not going to learn the black belt katas until you've learned your yellow belt and blue belt katas, right?
Yeah.
So Daphne, you have anything to say? You want to add?
On this subject, I figured you were going to talk about specific forms of play for advanced people.
No, I'm not going to talk about.
We're not even going to talk about it. Okay. Literally. Okay. But yeah,
because this is an art form, and if you're okay, let me put it this way: the trapeze in the circus, the trapeze act, trapeze, that was called.
The trapeze,
the the flying
Yeah.
trapeze.
The flying, yeah.
That's
Which is
really
the
dangerous
country.
and it's really advanced. And just because
Right.
you can do a somersault on the grass doesn't mean you're ready for the trapeze.
Okay. I would just like to say things. I know you don't want to name specifically, but I would say that if there is going to be any sort of breaking the skin,
Yes.
anything that can leave really, really heavy bruising, just things that, might, if it sounds unsafe, you know what I mean? Like, again, like breaking the skin or, really, really high impact stuff. If it sounds unsafe, you should probably get to really learn it or learn it from an expert first. If you have to question it at all, you should probably learn it from somebody who knows their stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if anybody says, "Do you know what you're doing?" You probably shouldn't do it.
Yeah, right. Do you mind if I carve this brand into you? How long have you been doing this for? You know what I mean? So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that are for pretty advanced people, and I would say most people who are getting into it focus on the thing that really got you into it. Or at least focus on the toys like floggers, canes, paddles, spanking, the middle of the bell curve stuff, right?
Yeah.
Or if you're into feet, play with feet and licking boots, yeah, that's all stuff that you can kind of just hit the ground running with that. So
Right.
The defining term is called edge play.
Yes.
So if something falls under the umbrella of edge play, it means you should not even consider playing with it until you've got some experience under your belt.
At least a year.
Edge play.
Interesting, because again,
and edge play, by the way, has nothing to do with knives. It can have knives.
It can.
It means taking someone to a mental, emotional, or physiological edge of where they're capable of going. The extreme edge.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll
edge of what
edging
kind of pain it. Yeah.
And then there's edging.
That's edging.
Yeah. That's different. That's for everybody.
Edging is a brand new fancy term for a tantric holdback.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. In Tantra, people have been holding back from orgasming for thousands of years. Now, in the last 20 years, we call it edging because people are resistant to this idea of this weird Hindu thing called Tantra. But thankfully, due to Sting, they aren't so much.
Yeah. So
anyway.
Edge play is for advanced people, and that includes anything to do with knives. I would say is part of edge play.
Well, not really
needles,
cutting. Anything that has to do with breaking the
cutting,
skin.
right?
Breaking the skin, and if I could throw out there, just again from hearing from my practice, particularly what folks would call breath play, which is really just cutting off oxygen. Anything that cuts off oxygen,
that's edge play.
Y'all, that is something that is so woo. Definitely, if you're just getting started or even just at any point in time, just understand that is a really difficult practice that I would be very, very cautious.
Yeah, because I mean, especially with the popularization of choking during sex, choke me daddy is like,
it is. It's a thing.
Let's discuss that right now since we brought it up. Okay. I'm going to give the positive on that and the negative on that. Number one, all forms of breath play is edge play.
Yes.
Okay? But you're right. It's been hyper popularized to a ridiculous degree. Here's the bottom line. The trachea, which is right here in the front, do not, under any circumstances whatsoever, there's no excuse, do not ever push directly on that. You can kill the person or at least send them to the hospital. And trust me, this will wreck your date. On the other hand,
you will not see that person again.
you can safely fake, capital F fake, choking somebody by squeezing the muscles on the sides of the neck. Okay, so I think this is the sternocleidomastoid muscle right here. Even further over to the side, it's the one that comes directly from your ear, directly down to your shoulder. There are nerves in there that if you squeeze those nerves on the side of the neck, it gives the impression and the complete illusion of being choked, but you're not actually cutting off blood. You're not actually cutting off oxygen. But I've seen submissives swoon from that. So if you have, so the idea is sides, yes, front, never.
And just as an FYI, guys, this is not for educational purposes. Do not take anything that we say here as a form of advice of anything you should or should not do. That's a decision you need to make. Please check and make sure you have your own information. I
Take a
appreciate y'all
class
talking
on
about
it.
that, but
Yeah.
take a class,
Take
learn about it.
classes and
But
read
please
books.
don't take anything from this
Yeah.
podcast and
No.
be like, yo, I heard this on the podcast.
Rainbow
Right,
Dreamcatcher
yeah,
said, I
like-
can just choke it like this.
This
Yeah.
podcast is for entertainment purposes only.
Yes, exactly.
Entertainment purposes only, y'all.
Yeah. And so with that bit of information that Master Arcane just gave us, that is for theory. And if you have any interest in doing any kind of choking or breath play, you really just need to get out into the community and learn. Take a class on it from an expert. Please do not do this at home until you are trained.
Go to thecrowacademy.com.
Yeah. You wouldn't eat fire, right? You wouldn't spit fire, eat fire at home just because some guy showed you it one time, right? You would take a class on it. Oh. Okay.
The reason you say these disclaimers is because people will.
People do.
Okay,
People
that's
People
true.
will.
But I'm saying, like, you wouldn't.
They don't.
You shouldn't. You shouldn't.
No.
I thought you guys were about to tell me a
But,
story. We're like,
let's circle this back around. Let's circle this back around.
Yeah.
So I spent 2 years learning everything I could about BDSM in London and Amsterdam. Then I came back to California, and I found the local BDSM society who had classes. And in this case, it was the Society of Janus up in San Francisco. And for another 2 years, I took every single class that they had. Didn't matter that I had to drive from pretty far away to get there. Did not matter. I had to drive an hour and a half there and back each time for the first year. But the point is, I soaked it up like a sponge. I learned from amazing people. Again, incredible teachers. I didn't take classes on stuff that I had no interest in whatsoever, that I knew I was never going to do. But if there was even a possibility, I was like, yeah, I could maybe end up doing that one day. I took a class in it. And that is the way to go. Absolutely.
Okay. And it also, just as a highlight, we've said it a couple times, but there are classes. There is information out there. We're going to put the links down in our summary, including crowacademy.com. There's a lot of different places that you can find good information, y'all. So we encourage you to please seek out that information. You don't have to do it on your own. Reach out to the community, learn together, find friends, find friendship, find community, and find education.
By the way, we're talking about how to meet people, so I was going to throw some more in on that one.
Yeah.
Okay, so for whatever reason, maybe it's the theater arts mentality or something in the Role Play Association, theater-based groups have a higher propensity for having people who are kinky or kink interested. Renaissance fairs have an unusually high number of people who are interested in kink and kinky stuff. And then one of the funniest things is when, I'm going to say it, I know it's going to make everybody cringe, when 50 Shades came out, what it did was it threw wide the conversation. Okay, so most people who know what BDSM is all about will tell you that book is a disaster. It's a train wreck. But the existence of the book got people who were so in the closet about all this to start talking about it. People who, I had stories come back to me about people I know personally who had not had sex with their husbands in 10 years. And then they read that book, and next thing you know, their sex life was fully reignited just because the concepts were so hot. So one thing you can do, and because like I said, most people don't like the book, but maybe there's people out there who like it or it helped reignite their sex life or something like that.
I would contest that there are millions of people
who love that book. I mean, a whole movie series.
Well,
technically
speaking,
it was a bestseller.
Well, yeah. Okay. Okay. Here's a fun one for you. Okay. If you look at the UNESCO statistics on world literacy, the number of people who purchased 50 Shades, the number of people who downloaded 50 Shades, including illegal downloads, and you compare that to people over the age of 18, you crunch all these statistics, 1 out of every 37 literate adults over the age of 18 on Earth has obtained a copy of that book. Doesn't mean they read it, but they've at least obtained a copy of it. But anyhow,
you got to sit on their bookshelf so they can seem freaky.
You're homing right in on what I was about to say. If you have a date come over, or if you're sitting at some coffee shop and you take a copy of 50 Shades of Grey and you drop it on the table as you're drinking your coffee and working on your laptop, and you see who comments and you see what the comment is. And if someone comes by and says,
Oh
It's a
yeah,
conversation
big
starter.
time.
That's what 50 Shades is. 50 Shades is a
Mhm.
conversation starter.
Icebreaker for
That's another
sure.
one.
Yeah.
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 And then, of
And then
course,
if
you got
somebody really in
there's
the BDSM community walks over and looks at you and goes, poser.
well, no, then what you should do is
Yeah.
say, why do you say that? And then they'll
Yeah.
say, because then they'll say that's not real BDSM. And you say, oh, really? I'd like to learn more about real BDSM. Where can I go find a class on
Right.
it?
Yeah. Hopefully, a BDSM person will look at that and be like, "Oh, please, let me show you. There are so many better books."
Exactly.
Let me invite you to
Exactly.
a month. Please
Yes.
come to a
Yeah,
month.
come to a month.
Yes. Come with me. Yeah.
Yeah. Here's my card. That's thecrowacademy.com.
Right. Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome,
So,
awesome. I don't know, y'all. I feel like we have gone through a lot of the different spaces. I love this conversation. I really appreciate y'all sharing your knowledge, your histories, your wisdom.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
No, no, no.
one thing we didn't touch on
Yes.
is the pros and cons. Like, what do you
Yeah, right.
what do you get out of it? You know, what things you love about it? What don't you love about it? You know, that type of
Yeah.
personal insight in the community, as well as your own personal interaction with one another.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I really love that there is such a big community for it. It's like it's having like a serious interest, right? I'm also a geek and a gamer, right? So it's
That's what
like
we met.
yeah, exactly. It is a way to bring people together, and you can make friends really, really easily and really quickly just having this in common, and so that's really fun. I love that there's such a great community where everyone gets together. We actually just went to a party where we played for about 45 minutes, and then the rest of the time we just sat there and we're socializing with friends. Had an amazing time, right? So it was really cool. Um, I also love that these types of relationships tend to be communication heavy. We hash through issues really quickly and we resolve them. We always resolve them. I can count probably on one hand how many times we've gone to bed angry at each other. You know what I mean? Almost 9 years. So I would say that's pretty
One
good, right?
hand. I can think of maybe. I think there's one. I can one.
Oh well, I
If
mean,
there's one, that's on my hand.
I was like, I can think of a couple more, but it's
Oh,
okay.
see, she went to bed angry at me 4 other times.
Yeah, right. But I mean, like, I don't know. As a woman, I keep track of this, but 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 no, this is definitely like the healthiest relationship and longest relationship I've ever been in, and I think there's a reason for that. Is because it's just there's a lot of personal responsibility on
Mhm.
myself and my master, and I would say that that's also one of the reasons that's sort of like it's a silly downside, I should say. I sometimes just want to be lazy and I don't want to have to work on myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Can't you just love me for me and love me at my worst? And it's like, no, you got to work on yourself too. You know what I mean? So I would say
Which
that, yeah, go ahead.
I would say that's something I want to tell for the people out there who want to be dominant.
Oh yeah.
One of the myths about being dominant is that you just get to be bossy and control people and boss them around and then have sex with them. That is not being dominant. That's being
Mm-mm.
bossy, period,
Yeah,
full stop.
that's being a jerk.
If you're going to be a dominant, you have to take a vested interest in the well-being of your submissive, and you have to work on yourself at least twice as hard as you will ever work on your submissive. So if you're
Mhm.
Yeah.
telling your submissive to be a better person, you have to be doing that double on yourself.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Very,
there's a
very
lot
important.
of
If you want to be a good
discipline.
dominant, if you want
Yeah.
to do this, if you want to get to the level where this is pure bliss, this is, being a dominant for me is my part of my heaven. It's part of
Mhm.
where I want to be, what I want to be doing
Right.
all the time, 24/7. The connection
Yeah.
that I have found with my beloved submissive is transcendental on a regular basis, like
That's awesome.
phenomenal connection. And
Mhm.
it happens just walking around the house. It happens when we're out shopping. It happens when we're in the middle of a really deep, passionate scene. When I'm doing a scene, when I'm playing with Daphne, the rest of the world vanishes. It's
Mhm.
just gone. It's just me and her in our little bubble, and it's amazing.
Mhm.
But we both work. It's an art form, and we both work on it from both sides to get better at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
and
cannot be
nonstop. Like I
lazy.
said,
Yeah.
been doing it there's no peak that you get to. There's no,
Right.
I have arrived. I am at the mountaintop. Been doing this 3 decades and I'm still learning great new stuff all the time. As Daphne told you, we just started this new kind of journal where we're documenting our best scenes. This is new learning for us. And there always will, and I hope there always will be. But also
Right.
the BDSM umbrella is massive.
Yeah.
There are thousands of ways to play. So
Yeah.
I know there's huge segments of BDSM that I'm just not interested in. And then there's others that we're a little bit interested in. And there's
Right.
some that we're deeply interested in. And there's
Yeah.
some that we're going to present. And everybody's different. Every single person in the BDSM world is a little different about what they're going to be into, what they like, what they don't like. You know, what way I describe it is if you think of the finest 3-course meal you've ever had in your life cooked by a master chef and you're enjoying it and it's amazing. That is really terrific vanilla sex, okay? Plain vanilla sex. Then, and by the way, again, as Daphne said, vanilla is not a derogatory term.
All
The
right.
Kama
It just
Sutra
is.
is the greatest book on vanilla sex ever written. And it actually does have a little bit on biting and scratching and hair pulling in it.
Right.
Anyhow, so then then that same chef comes up behind you and taps you on the shoulder and says, "Did you like that?" And you're like, "Yeah, that was amazing." And he says, "Okay, look over there." And there's these double doors and they go wide and there's a ballroom full of 100 or 200 other different recipes. And that's the world of fetish and kink. Those are all that, and you'll go and you'll taste some things. You'll be like, "That's amazing." You'll taste some things. You'll go, "Not for me." You'll taste some things, and you just have a little bit. You say, "Oh, I'll come back to that." That's what fetish and kink is like, and there's just so much to do. There's a bell curve. There's the
This
stuff
was
that
good. This one tastes like a
blindfolds and
foot.
bondage.
This one
Yeah.
is a foot.
This one is a foot.
People are
You
into
said
that,
something
trust
in-
me. That's a common one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You actually said in the beginning. You said like there's 86% of people have mentioned being into it. So a buddy of mine and myself, we were once teaching a BDSM class at a lifestyles sex positive convention. And we were the only BDSM class. And so I wanted people to understand, like you said, how common this is. About 80 people in the audience. And we had everybody close their eyes. And we said, put your hand up if you've ever been blindfolded or blindfolded somebody in an intimate romantic situation. And keep your hand up, but don't open your eyes. Then we had the same thing, put your hand up if you've ever been tied up or tied someone up in an intimate romantic situation. And the same thing again for spanking. And then I had everybody open their eyes. Every single person's hand was up. It is that common. That's the middle of the bell curve stuff. Yeah, but it's
Right.
that common. People try it, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah,
So-
I think. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna ask because now I'm curious. I want to know, Master, what is your like not favorite part of like what's the downside? What is your downside? Do you think of BDSM? Or do you even have one?
BDSM?
Yeah. So mine was like, oh, the fact that it's like constant work on myself. Sometimes I just want to be lazy.
Have I ever actually mentioned anything I don't like about it?
I don't think so. That's just why I was.
I can't.
I was like,
can't
when she
think-
asked that, I was like, I
This
This
can't
is
think
who
of
I
anything for
am. I mean,
you.
I told the story of how I got into this when I was very small, and then my first lover was into it, and it's just been part of my entire adult life.
There's no downside for
And,
him. Yeah.
Actually, it's funny you should say that, because for me personally, and the reason the Crow Academy exists is because through all the different changes I've gone through in my life, my attraction to fetish and kink has never changed. That's the one single thing that I can say has never changed. So it's really always been a positive. There was a period in my life way back in college, so before the 30 years older than that, that I was sitting there one day. I was going to school in a town that was extremely, extremely feminist, which is fine. It's great. In fact, I actually have an article on my other website, arcaneadvice.com, that I want guys to know that being a male dominant and appreciating and supporting the feminism, modern feminism, is perfectly
Crucial.
fine, that they
It's
go
crucial.
together actually quite nicely.
Yeah.
And that was
So let's back-
arcaneadvice.com.
At arcaneadvice.com.
Right.
Exactly. And so I'm sitting there in college and I'm in this town. I'm a young guy and I'm trying to figure out how does it all work together? How can I be so into this kinky stuff and wanting to tie up my partner, but also be so supportive of women's rights? And I'm meditating on it. I was in college, meditating like half the college students do. And I'm thinking about it. And all of a sudden I just had this revelation that I could do both, that I could, and instead of seeing my fetish and my kink as something to work against, I literally, and this is the exact actual visualization I had, I suddenly turned it into a jetpack and threw it on my back.
Mm-hmm.
And since that day, so that's a long time ago, fetish has been empowering to me. And I believe it can be for anybody who approaches it like the Crow Academy style, as an art form, as something to perfect, as a way to build amazing connection with your partner.
Mm-hmm.
There's another myth about BDSM that I'd like to dispel right here, right now, which is that BDSM is inherently polyamorous. It is not.
Mm-hmm.
Polyamory is a choice.
Mhm.
During that initial negotiation thing, that's one of the things you discuss.
Absolutely.
Do you want a polyamorous relationship? Are you okay with that? Do you want a monogamous relationship? Are you okay with that?
Mm-hmm.
Daphne and I have been monogamous for over 8 years, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, I know people who are really, really polyamorous, and they won't have it any other way. Everybody involved, very open, honest polyamory where everybody knows it's all above board. But there's a lot of self-discovery in all of this. So to answer your question, Daphne, where is the downside in all of this? I'll tell you where the downside is, actually, funnily enough.
Oh, here we go. Yeah.
So Daphne and I, from 2018 to 2022, we did the Crow Academy World Tour, and we're teaching classes around the world. And one of the, and that was also a chance for us to see if there's somewhere else we wanted to live, like maybe another country. And we checked out other places to live. It was great, kind of what you guys are doing now.
Mm-hmm.
And the bottom line was that we realized one of the criteria for us is we want to live somewhere where there's an active BDSM community, because we love the community. We love everything Daphne just talked about. Just being able to hang out. What I talked about, like the sexuality is not even a concern. You just get right into life and philosophy and how you doing and friendships. And so that is probably the only thing that I can even think of. And I'm even reaching for that. It's just that you realize that, if you go to these beautiful places with beaches and mountains and everything, and only a population of 10,000, why are probably not going to have much of a BDSM community?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's it. That's the only thing.
Okay. Yeah. There you go. That answers the question.
But I don't know. I mean, if you're okay with living in, what was it, Germany or Brazil,
might be able to find some.
Those
are some really beautiful places that will also have a large BDSM community. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I actually taught a class in Sao Paulo. Yeah. That was fun. I spoke English, and my friend is this Brazilian dominatrix, and so she translated the whole class as I was talking. It was a big BDSM community.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you guys so much for what you share. We're going to be putting a lot of these links in the comments. We're not going to do the question of the day, as we mentioned before, but if you have questions, if you want to send us those questions, if you want to share your stories or share questions with Master Arcane or Daphne, go on ahead and send it to us in all of our social medias. We've got our email, which is rainbowdreamcatchertlp
at gmail.com.
All the social medias, including
Instagram at Rainbow Dreamcatcher the Love Pod.
That one.
Those are the two main ones.
I
think we're also on Thread or X or whatever.
X,
but
Facebook.
Look, y'all, I'm old and I'm trying to social media, so
he's not that old.
We're lucky we don't have a Friendster's page.
Are we on MySpace
I'm
yet?
gonna put us up on MySpace.
I miss MySpace. I love
I'm gonna put us up in an AOL chat room.
Oh my God.
It's going back.
I am that old.
I am that old too. I was an AOL chat.
Yes, he is.
Yes.
I'm just pining for MySpace right now.
Yeah, right. Are you pining for
OG MySpace, not the Rupert Murdoch MySpace.
No, the OG MySpace.
Yeah.
MySpace came right after Friendster. That's right. Yes.
Yeah. That's right.
I don't even know Friendster. I think I was too young for that, but
you're definitely too young for that. You're absolutely too young for that. I was listening back and forth between 30 years ago. I'm like, that's definitely don't know nothing about those.
I also know nothing about that. Yeah. Me too. Yeah. Just kidding, guys. Not.
All right, but y'all, thanks for listening. We definitely have to do a part 2 to this.
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
Because
we
didn't even get I want to dive into kinks and fetishes,
different types.
Different
There's
types
so
and
much
stuff
more
like
we
that.
can talk about.
So we definitely have to do a part 2. So listeners, if there's a part of the subject matter that we didn't cover, hit us up in the comments. Let us know what you'd like to hear about, and we'll put another show together. We'll have them back on, and we'll do this again.
Yeah, awesome. So I guess let's go ahead and wrap up for today.
Thank you all.
This was wonderful. Thank you so much for
thanks
what
for
you
having
bring.
us.
Thanks for having us.
And again, all of this information is going to be in the links. We want to send a great thank you to Master Arcane and his submissive Daphne. Thank you
And
so
also,
much.
don't forget, his book is Igniting the Fire, The Art of
Romantic Submission.
Yeah, I was trying to read that.
On Amazon.
On Amazon.
There's a collector's edition hardback that's got beautiful fake leather cover with gold stamping, and every page is photographic quality paper and hundreds of photos. There's only 300 copies of that left.
Yeah,
in
we're
the world.
running out.
Go get your copy right away.
Now,
And
then
there's
it's
an
going to
ebook version
paperback.
too.
So yeah, if you want a hardback, get it now.
Look, by the way, which means I'll probably have to go get a hardback. And when I see you, you better autograph it.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Deal. Easily done.
All right, y'all. Well, this has been Rainbow Dreamcatcher, the
Love
Podcast.
Podcast. Bye-bye.
Bye.